talk you through the price comparison, which is an important piece of work, important element in our study. And I will quickly say a few things about the methodology, the approach, and then talk you through the main findings. You can find the details behind the analysis in our report in section 4. So we have taken a user profile analysis. So we basically designed a number of profiles for retail and institutional investors and for small and large brokers. The profiles are informed by actual data on investors and brokers in Brazil received from CVM and Bovespa. We then apply the user profiles to the pricing schedule of Bovespa and the pricing schedule of infrastructure providers in other financial centers, and that gives you then an indication of the cost to brokers and investors. The focus is on infrastructure providers, so the cost of using infrastructure providers, but in addition to that, we have also looked at the cost to end investors. The analysis looks at a broad range of comparators, so we've looked at lots of different financial centers of different sizes and financial centers that are different at different stages in their development. We've also undertaken a sensitivity analysis to see whether the findings of our analysis are sensitive to any of the assumptions we have made, and as we have presented in our report, the findings are robust and not sensitive to the assumptions. And finally, we have looked at the Rosenblatt analysis that was commissioned by Bovespa that does undertakes a sort of a similar analysis, and we have reviewed that in detail. So first of all, a quick overview of the main messages coming out of the international price comparison. For institutional investors, trading fees in Brazil are similar to trading fees in financial centers such as Italy, Spain and Singapore, but somewhat higher than in other financial centers such as the US, the UK, Canada and Australia, financial centers where competition has been introduced. If we then look at institutional investors and post-trading fees, we see that generally speaking the fees are in Brazil appear to be higher than post-trading fees in the other financial centers that we analyzed in our report. These conclusions, importantly, these conclusions hold even if an adjustment is made for the differences in services and if we look at the cost to end investors. The only exception is that if you look at the retail investors, you estimate the cost to retail investors, you see that those costs in Brazil are very much in line with the cost of retail brokers in other financial centers. Then the Rosenblatt analysis, which was undertaken or commissioned by Bovespa, it undertakes a similar analysis. We have reviewed that. It comes to the conclusion that that the costs in Brazil are very much in line with the costs in other financial centers. We have reviewed that and come to the conclusion that it overestimates some of the custodian charges in the foreign financial center they have looked at. And finally, if you, given the scale of the Brazilian market and the significance of economies of scale, if the market in Brazil continues to grow, you would expect the trading and post-trading fees to come down. So let's have a quick look at the cost of trading services. So this slide presents the cost of trading services in a number of different financial centers for a number of different types of profiles of investors. And what we see is there are a number of trading platforms where the fees are sort of more than 1.5 basis points. There are a number of trading platforms where the fees are in between 0.4 basis points and 1.5 basis points. And then there are some financial centers where the trading platforms have fees below 0.4 basis points. Brazil is in that middle group. So basically what we see is that the fees, the trading fees in Brazil are lower than in some of the other financial centers like Poland and Indonesia, but similar to the trading fees in Italy, Spain and Singapore, but higher than, for example, in the US, UK, Canada and Australia, the kind of countries where competition has been introduced. Now we're looking at the cost of trading and post-trading services, so both basically. Very similar analysis, and what you see is that generally speaking, the trading and post-trading fees in Brazil are sort of similar to those in Singapore, South Africa and Spain, but higher again than in the US, the UK, Canada and Australia. It's also interesting to look at the relationship between the cost of trading and post-trading and the value of trading. Due to economies of scale, you expect some kind of relationship between the cost of trading and post-trading and the value of trading, and that's more or less what we see in this slide. So generally speaking, the pattern is that the more substantial the value of trading on an annual basis, the lower the fees. And that also suggests that actually Brazil, in terms of trading and post-trading fees, given the scale of the Brazilian market, is not so much out of line with the cost of trading and post-trading in other financial centers of a similar size. At the same time, what you would expect is that if Brazil basically continues to grow, you would expect that the fees basically of trading and post-trading to come down more or less in line with what you observe in other financial centers. We have extended this analysis because, as we know, due to the beneficiary owner model in Brazil, that results in a lot of transparency, there are a number of things that work slightly differently here compared to other financial centers. So the CSD here holds accounts at the end investor level, and therefore delivers the security directly into the end investor's account. In other financial centers, this is not done by the CSD, but this is done by the custodians. So in other words, Bovespa undertakes certain activities that are undertaken by custodians in other financial centers. So to adjust for this and to present a more sort of like-for-like comparison between Brazil and other financial centers, what we have done is, for the UK and for Germany, we have included the custodian cost. And that is what we present here in this slide. Interestingly, you see that there is then less of a difference between the cost in Brazil and the cost in Germany and the UK, but there is still a difference. That difference is smaller than we just presented on the previous slide, but there is still a difference between the cost in Brazil and the cost in, for example, Germany and the UK. And just to mention where we got that kind of data from, because this is data in relation to custodians. That data is basically from a study we did for the European Commission. It's based on a large sample of custodians, so the data comes directly from the custodians themselves. It's also interesting to look at the cost of trading to end investors. And you will have seen in our reports we have undertaken an international comparison of the cost to retail investors. So if you look at what retail brokers charge retail investors in Brazil, and you compare that with what, for example, retail brokers charge to retail investors in the UK, you see that actually those costs are very much in line. There is not that much of a difference. If you look at institutional investors, it is different. If you look at Brazil, and that's in one of the Bovespa analysis as well, you very quickly get around 4 basis points basically as a cost to institutional investors. If you compare that, for example, with the cost to institutional investors in the UK, you have something like around 2.5 basis points. So clearly, even if you look at it from an end investor point of view, the cost of trading are still a bit higher in Brazil than in other financial centers. And then finally, a quick review of the Rosenblatt analysis undertaken for Bovespa. It compares basically the cost of trading and post-trading in Brazil with the cost of trading and post-trading in Frankfurt. It undertakes a user profile analysis, so conceptually the approach is very much in line with the approach we have taken in our study. It concludes that the cost of trading and post-trading in Brazil is very much in line with the cost of trading and post-trading in Germany. We've looked at that in more detail. We've come to the conclusion that the study done by Rosenblatt overestimates the custodian charges in Germany. We have compared that with the study we've done for the European Commission, which is based on a very large sample of custodians, and we have clearly come to the conclusion that the Rosenblatt analysis overestimate that charge, and that's one of the main reasons that they come to the conclusion that the costs are very similar. We think that conclusion does not hold.